Coming to you from the greatest city in the world, this is the #1 showbiz podcast. It's Talk for Two. Here's your host, Matt Bailey.
Hey, thank you, Gary. Welcome back, everybody, to week of 100. This is day 4. As always, thank you to Axtel Expressions and the Tangent Bound Network. I love you guys so much, and I want all our listeners to go check you guys out and support you. Somehow I started talking directly to the two people who are our season sponsors, Steve Axtel, Mark Bogner. Go check them out. Today, the incomparable, hysterical, and awesome Joel Hodgson is our guest. Of course, Joel is known as the creator of Mystery Science Theater 3000. And there's not a soul on this earth who doesn't know that MST3K became a cult hit and made Hodgson a household name. But did you know that Joel, like this show, began his journey in show business with ventriloquism? It's true. When he heard that vents were our first and most loyal fan base, well, that's really all he wanted to focus on, and I love him for it. We get inside the mind and origins of Mr. Hodgson, including the story behind the vent mask. But of course, I couldn't let him get away without my spin on all those MST3K questions he's forced to answer. Here now to talk about why he's particular with his vent figures, our interview with Joel Hodgson.
In the not too distant future, next Sunday AD, there was a guy named Joel, not too different from you or me.
All right, writer, producer, creator, inventor, everything, but most known, of course, as the creator of Mystery Science Theater 3000, Mr. Joel Hodgson. Welcome to Talk for Two. How are you today, sir?
Hey, I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. You're a perfect fit for this week here of 100 episodes. Now, I got to ask, when somebody like you has your fingers in so much, is there one thing you consider yourself most? Do you consider yourself mostly a writer, mostly an inventor? What do you put yourself under? What kind of umbrella?
Well, that's a great question, and I think I'm kind of a generalist. It's only, I think, Hollywood that kind of creates all those roles. Like, are you a producer? Are you a writer? Are you an actor? Mm-hmm. And I think it's natural for us to want to do everything. And it's really hard for Hollywood to make money if you do everything. They can't put you in a category and make that a line item. So I just think that we always approach creative stuff by doing whatever we want to do, and then there's always a specific thing that emerges, I guess. But I think I'll go with that for my answer.
No, I love it. I think it's great. Now,
Thanks.
You mentioned Hollywood. You moved to LA in the early mid 80s, and you had success right away. I was reading, I think you found yourself on television within 4 months. Was that typical of the time? Was that typical to kind of go out there and be able to make it right away?
Yeah, I mean, this was a really accelerated time in stand-up. I just happened to hit it at this perfect time when there was this great, kind of movement, with all. I think it started with guys like Jay Leno and Richard Pryor and Letterman, and the whole concept of the Comedy Store, and I think Robin Williams was in there too, and so that was kind of happening. That was kind of took off, and those guys were all getting famous. I mean, I was probably like 6 or 8 years after that all was starting, but it was still growing, and then cable kind of happened, and that became this wide open, like, kind of universe for comics, and obviously with like just things like Sam Kinison normally could have never been on television, but because of cable he became famous. So it was really opening up. So I just happened to it was just a lucky timing And mine was a little bit faster than others, just that it was like 4 months turnaround from the time I went to LA till the time I got on Letterman. That was really fast. Yeah, it was, I just got lucky.
Yeah, you did, but it makes me wonder. I'm so fascinated with that era, from the era you talked about up through yours, that it doesn't seem like that is possible today. It seems like it's much more of a fight if you go out there, because there's so much more things for people to be doing, and there's so many more people out there than it seems like opportunity.
Yeah, that could be. I don't know. I guess that's true. But I'm so far out of that now. You know, it's really like it's like a young man's game, because it's like when you do stand up and you do the clubs, you have to have a huge amount of time to invest. I mean, basically every night you have to be doing it. Like, I found my planner from college when I first started doing stand-up, and I really was doing 5 or 6 shows a night while I was going to college. I was going into Minneapolis and doing stand-up, and, or my version of stand-up. It wasn't really stand-up.
Well, your version is...
What's that?
I was just going to say, well, your version of stand-up is still pretty funny and pretty brilliant, and I just love that style. Where did it come from? What you did?
My whole thing, I started as a ventriloquist.
Yes.
I started out like, kind of just fascinated with how does show business work, and how would I ever get into it. So I started out with taking the Fred Mayer course was offered through Clinton Detweiler, and who had bought the Mayer School and set it up in Littleton, Colorado. So that's where I kind of found out about it. I think my parents were, I think it was through the church. It was like something like with child evangelism, and it was kind of like Clinton Detweiler marketed to churches, which was really smart, because there's a lot of people doing variety acts in church. And so it was really funny, like somebody at church got this invitation to, get a deal on the Fred Mayer course, and they gave it to me because they knew I was interested in that. And then I took the 40 lesson master course, which is a really amazing, it's the best course in ventriloquism I've ever seen, and it really teaches you how to do it. It's very thorough, and by the time I was done, I was like, I could do it, and it really served me well. I started doing birthday parties, and at that time too, I was interested in magic, so it really helped me get into the magic club, because I was a really good ventriloquist, and so I was able to kind of I had a dummy, I had a figure. It wasn't a dummy. It was what I bought it from Clinton Detweiler. It was a crazy bird, is what they called it, but it was really cleverly built. It had moving eyes and it had a moving head, and so it was as close as I could get to a professional figure. Part of my story is I just hated the way ventriloquist dummies looked. And this was, my idea of the ultimate dummy was, I didn't know it at the time, but it was a Frank Marshall figure. It's like I was sitting there going, that's a dummy. But again, you just don't know how to express that when you're in junior high school. You don't know anything about Frank Marshall. You don't understand that, the way he makes figures and the way they look is like the ultimate dummy in a way.
Yeah.
And so I was always really frustrated, because I'd look at all the catalogs and I do a really long, actually, I do about 15 minutes on my search for the ultimate ventriloquist dummy. I have a one-man show,
Yes.
and I basically show slides of ventriloquist dummies from catalogs, and people all understand what I mean, where it's just like really hard to find. So I was always really discouraged by that, and started to really make my own figures. I started with the Crazy Bird, and then recovered that. My mom helped me recover it, and I actually made it better. I made it look better. I made it into a penguin, which it probably should have been. If you've ever seen a Crazy Bird, that's kind of what they look like, but nobody was making it like a Crazy Bird, so I thought that was something new I could do. But I started to kind of reskin, and that comes from magic, the idea of reskinning things. You know, magicians say there's probably about 14 or 16 different magic effects, but they reskin it. You know, they create a new context. They might use a method, but then reinvent that. So I was doing that to my figures. I also I took a Pelham puppet, which were nice. They made marionettes mostly, but they made a really nice, like kind of hand puppet that had this head stick on it. It was a composite, it was like a composite head with a really nice spotted jaw. And I took that and built a body for it, and I retextured it and made it a werewolf, because I always liked the werewolf from the Munsters. So I made a werewolf ventriloquist dummy named Arlo. So those were kind of my two figures that I would use. So that was kind of I was really frustrated, and I'm still really particular about bent figures. I just think there's only a few of them that look great, and a lot of them look really weird.
Yeah.
And to me, I would always just default to a Marshall figure. In fact,
well, now they're so rare. Now those Marshall figures are hard to find.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. It's been gone a long time, and I have figures of my own that I have two figures that were based on Marshall figures. So in the rare occasions when I do that, my figure looks like a Marshall figure.
That's fantastic. I gotta ask, because I saw this YouTube clip I think last night I was looking through it, but I think I'd seen it before. The two-headed Danny O'Danny. I love that bit that you do when you were doing just the stand up with the props and stuff. I can see your ventriloquist origins. I mean, where did you find those Juro Danny O'Days to put that together? And what was that idea?
I think it just started with a lot of my stuff came from, I was in college in 1978, and it was like, that's when the world was really changing. It was kind of like arena rock was like really big in the 70s. You had bands like Kiss and Journey and Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and there's these massive arena rock bands. And right in 1978, my freshman year of college, it all disintegrated, and punk rock happened, as well as like new bands like Talking Heads and people like Bruce Springsteen and the B-52s and Devo, and everybody was stripping down rock, and the Clash, they were all stripping it down to its bare minimum, and repurposing. They were repurposing a lot of things from the past, and so I just kind of cued off that, and we were all getting clothes from like the Salvation Army and from the Goodwill, because you couldn't find cool clothes that you liked in those stores, and so in the regular stores, and so that was ongoing. But then I'd go into the Salvation Army and start finding props and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's kind of was my, aesthetic. And so it's all found objects and stuff that people had forgotten about. And so I was filling out my act with a lot of these found objects. And I would often find those Juro what do they call them? Celebrity dolls, Juro celebrity dolls. And there was always Danny O'Danny's around. So I would always buy them. And then I had a couple of them, and I go, oh, I know what to do. Instead of Danny O'Day, he'll be Danny O'Danny. And I guess I'm just fascinated with that idea of two head sticks. I think it came from, the ultimate ventriloquist when you're a kid is a guy with a dummy on each knee having a three-way conversation.
Classic
it's like
picture, yeah.
Charlie, Edgar Bergen did it with Charlie McCarthy and Mortimer Snerd, and Paul Winchell did it with Knucklehead Smith and Jerry Mahoney. And so I think growing up, you think, oh, that the two dummy route is the way to go. And so I just thought it was funny to combine them in one dummy. And I love the image of it.
I love it.
So I just made it myself, and had somebody make the clothes for it.
I think it's a fantastic prop. And then you did another fantastic prop for the event world, the mask for the audience participation mask.
Yeah, the vent jaw. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Where'd that come from? That's just awesome idea. Where'd it come from?
Oh my God, it's been so amazing seeing that thing take off. It's just astonishing to me that, thousands of vents, I'm assuming 1,000 vents are doing it now, like just based on YouTube.
Yeah, it's very popular.
That was really interesting, because that came from my search for the ultimate ventriloquist dummy. As I told you, I was always really frustrated with how dummies looked. And it was just like, it just wasn't ever happening. I couldn't make sense of it. I didn't get those Frank Marshall duplicate dummies till a few years ago. So I'm talking about, I think I got to that. That was just prior to Mystery Science Theater. So that must have been about 1980, 85, I guess. And basically, the way I got to it was really unusual. I was in it was Twin Cities Magic and Costume. And there was a thing where they had only offered it 1 year, but it was basically a monster mask. So it was a whole face mask, right?
Yeah.
That you put on, looks like an alien or something.
I can see
and
it,
the feature was that it had it had two things. It had pop-out eyes, and it had a moving jaw. And it was both done with a billows, so it was like a squeeze ball.
Oh, yes.
And I just looked at it and I go, oh, this is a dumb mask, but you know what? I'm going to harvest the parts off this. So I took the eyes off and I made a piece. So it was kind of like a Big Daddy Roth. I don't know if you're familiar with those drawings. Big Daddy Roth did the rat fink and did all those gnarly, their eyes are always bucking out of their heads.
Oh, yes, yeah.
One piece of it was to do this thing where I go, it's a Big Daddy Roth impression, and I'd have a stick shift in my hand, and then I'd make this noise like joystick.
Yeah.
And then I'd bulge out the eyes. And then the other piece was I go, oh, I got it. I'll take this jaw. This is such a great mechanism. And I'll put it on a half mask, and have people come up and I'll do that with them. And so that was kind of where that came from. I kind of split that idea in half. And I remember that same day I just walked around and found, I go, this mask is stupid. It was like an alien mask or something. And so I found these great caveman masks that had kind of a big jaw on them. And if you've ever seen pictures of me performing the original one, there are these nice big jaws that kind of hang off the face. And I'd always do it with two people. I'd bring up two people and, interview them before I put on the mask. I'd go, where are you from? What's your name? And then I'd break it into two with I basically have one guy would talk like Charlie McCarthy and have kind of a high voice. The one guy would be a dumb guy like Mortimer Snerd.
Love it.
So I'll do the voice for you. It's like, oh yeah, my name is Rick and I come from Madison, Wisconsin. And the other guy would be, yep, oh yeah, I came to the show.
That's perfect.
I came to the show today and now I'm on stage talking. Yep. And so I just do that for a while to demonstrate it. And then at the close that I do this song, like I do like a soul song where I would be like an ensemble and we'd lip sync to the music to kind of close it.
That's
so
awesome.
We did the song Think. We did the song Think, the Aretha Franklin song Think. So it was like kind of a big production number.
That's fantastic.
But anyway, so that's kind of how it happened. And it was really interesting because I said to myself, wow, this is like really strong. But I was kind of like getting out of stand-up. So I said to myself, you know what? I have this show booked at the Comedy Magic Club, and it's very rare that you have the presence of mind to do this. And I think that's why I liked the story so much, because I said, this is like a really good idea. I'm going to like take all my stuff. I had all this new material, and my idea was I'm going to sell it when I go to LA, because I was in Minnesota. I got this stuff on a seat, and I go, yeah, I'll just sell this stuff. But this one in particular is especially good. I know someone's going to want it, and I'm going to want a lot of money for it. So that was kind of it. And I went and did the show. It was at the Comedy Magic Club, and I was co-headlining with a guy named Jake Johansson. So I was doing my stuff. He was doing his stuff, and that was kind of it. That's where I started to showcase it.
That's wonderful. And the rest is history. And as you were getting out of stand-up, you were moving into something that I would be remiss, absolutely, everybody would kill me if we didn't spend the last part of our interview talking about Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Wait a minute, but I'm not done.
I'm sorry.
Telling the story of the vent match.
Go ahead. Yes, please.
The next thing that happened, I was just queuing it up for the big ending.
Yes, please.
The thing that happened
I'm sorry.
is when I'm doing the Vendeck that night, Ron Lucas came up.
Yes,
Ron
there we
Lucas
go.
Came up to me, and he said, wow, that's like a really cool idea. And I said, well, it's really great you said that, because it's for sale, and it's $20,000. And he had kind of a funny look on his face. And I didn't see him again for a long time, but we finally worked it out, and he ended up paying me. So I'm super proud that I got paid. I think I'd have a lot different opinion about what's going on with the bent jaw if I hadn't gotten paid for it.
Yeah.
And then the other cool thing is that then he licensed it to Terry Fader. So he then licensed it to Terry Fader for $50,000, and I got my percentage of that. So I was really happy about getting, I got. It wasn't like I came up with an idea and shucks, everybody stole it. It was really like I actually got paid for it. Well, so I'm pretty happy about that.
That's awesome. And it's an origin story that we don't get to hear. So I'm sorry for jumping you on that one. I thought you were wrapping it up, but
yeah,
no.
That's okay, because there's so much confusion about it, and it's like people. I know that there are people out there that claim that they came up with it, and they just simply didn't. I mean, I've got it's really funny. I got photo evidence of one of the first times I performed a bit. And the guy that I have it strapped to is a friend of mine who's a patent attorney. So he's there to completely validate the time he saw it and where it was. I have just evidence of where and when, and I have photo evidence of doing it. And nobody has any photo evidence prior to mine. So, it's kind of like one of those funny things, but I'm just super proud of it. And I love that it's getting a lot of use, and it just is one of those great things for events where they can do it and do a regular event act and then bring up somebody from the audience to do a completely different thing with it.
Yeah, it really, really took off, Joel. It's fantastic.
Oh, thanks, man. It's like I invented ventriloquist catnip or something, the way people are behaving. But I'm just super proud of it, and I love that it's out there, and,
I do
pretty
too.
cool.
It's fantastic. And then there's something you're known for throughout the world, not just in the event community, and that is Mystery Science Theater 3000. I think you have been asked over and over and over again about this incredible show, cult hit. It's classic. Time rated it one of their 100 best TV shows of all time. Are you surprised the way it took off? I mean, does it really shock you?
Well, no, it's like anything, it's kind of like the bent jaw. It's like, it's a good idea, and you just are kind of waiting for everyone else to catch on. I mean, no one does anything unless they think it's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not surprised by it. I mean, I guess that's why you make a TV show, is you think there's a broad audience for something. So it worked the way I'd hoped to, but now it's getting ridiculous because it's been over 25 years, and it's had such a nice long life, and it's still out there and working. So I'm super proud of it. But also, the origins of the robots are really, if you look at them, their stringing is just like a vent figure.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you that. The influence of Vent can very, very much be seen in those characters. It's really cool how you brought everything with you.
And it is like the ultimate ventriloquist thing. It's a guy with two dummies, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the silhouettes, it's that array, and so it's really been It's informed a lot of it, but mostly just the whole way I make puppets was really based on that, and that's important because. When I was doing MST 25 years ago, it was all like, everything was like soft puppets. Everything was about the Muppets.
Mm-hmm.
And if you did puppets that were like soft, it wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have looked right. So I think that has a big effect on it. And also, like, I wanted to have my own unique looking figures, so the idea of making them hard rather than soft was like the logical thing. Mm-hmm. Making them robots, making robot puppets. So that comes from Vent too. It's really interesting. So that particular part of MST is really in there,
It really is. And what you did from the puppet perspective is you made. And you kind of alluded to this with, talking about the Marshall figures, but other kinds of figures that were hard for you to enjoy. You really made the hard figure look pretty, and well, I guess pretty is the wrong word, but you made it attractive, and kind of I can see where you had the influence of wanting it to look aesthetically pleasing and not kind of freaky, and you really had achieved that.
Yeah.
So.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I was really proud of those, and thank you.
Yeah, it's fun. I'm curious because I love the show. How would you pick the movies? How would you pick what you would heckle? What was that production process?
Well, number one for the vernaculars, it's not heckling. We're like
riffing. Yes.
It's like we're like vampires. You have to invite us,
Yeah.
Heckling is people usually who aren't invited, and riffing is people who are.
Oh, yes.
I mean, my first concept was the idea of, I understood that there were movies in the public domain, and that was kind of the first gesture with MST. It was like kind of like, oh, I know I can get movies because no one's going to let us do this. No one's going to let us riff on these if they knew what we were doing, the people who own the copyright. But over time, they started to understand it was another way for them to make money, another profit stream. And if they had a movie that we wanted to use, it probably wasn't making much money, so they kind of saw it as a positive. So it kind of worked out. And to answer your question, it was, when we when we first started at KTMA, this local TV station in Minneapolis, they had movies in their library. So we would just pull movies in their library that fit. You know, they had Gamera movies. Our pilot was The Green Slime, and so the Gamera movies really helped kind of cement where we were going with it. But we did all kinds of movies. We did a disaster movie called SST Death Flight. MST works with almost every kind of movie except comedies. You know, it doesn't. You get a little too cynical if you try to make something. Someone's trying to be funny, and then you're trying to make something funny on top of you.
Yeah,
you can appear as kind of a jerk. So
and they kind of cancel each other out.
To avoid that. Yeah, we tended to avoid that. And then when we did the show, and when we got paid to do the show for Comedy Central, we would have, someone at HBO Downtown Productions basically would pre-clear the rights to the film, and then send us a big box of VHS tapes. You know, this is back in the day when everything was on VHS tapes, but that was actually kind of revolutionary to get. You know, prior to that, there were these big 2-inch beta tapes that were really giant, really hard to deal with, and would have been really expensive to ship. But VHS tapes were kind of a revolution at the time, and you could get a bunch of them. They were light, and they'd send us a big box of them. And Frank Conniff, who was TV's Frank, it was his job to screen the movies and then pick out the movies that he thought would work. And then we'd screen those during lunch when we had our lunch break. He'd just run a bunch of movies, and we'd go, "Oh, that one looks good. Let's use that." Yeah. So we kind of went that route.
That's awesome. So he was the one actually sentenced to watch the movies in real life. I think that's kind of funny.
He had to screen the movies, and there were a lot of movies that weren't good enough, you know, that were too bad or didn't have enough of a narrative, you know.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. And I heard that it started that you guys would just improv, and then when you went to Comedy Central, they made you write. You had to write. You wrote the riffs, and then.
They didn't make us write. That's like it was really my decision to write them. Mostly because. More than anything, the reason why we improvised them was that, you know, back then it was impossible. The idea of like now when you can like annotate something like on YouTube, you can actually describe the time code. And back then, 25 years ago, that was a very abstract idea. The idea of this movie is spooling and you're putting jokes in, and there was the idea that there was a time code, but the time code had an hour, it had minutes, it had seconds, and then it had tenths of seconds. So basically you had a speedometer with about 10 digits that you had to keep track of. So it was really complicated. And so we just opted for doing it the way you'd think we would, is we'd just get in there and riff on it and improvise it. And I was never that comfortable with it. I didn't feel like I was a particularly good improviser. And Trace and Josh were really good at it. And so once we got paid to do it, I said, "Oh, my friends are going to see this. We're going to start writing it." Yeah. So, and the reason why I reacted the way I did is I'm really proud of it. The amazing thing is we never got any note from the network. They didn't know what to do with us. So we never got a single note. We never got a single note from the network on the content or how to do any of it. And that's part of the secret of our success, I think.
Yeah, and this is a question I have. It's really weird. It's one of the history of MST is just so broad, and it's so out there for everybody who's interested to go and look, and you can really do it's fascinating reading. But the question I have is what convinced the network for a weekly series that at one point had an order of over 20 episodes a season, a regular season order, to every week give you 2 hours. You don't see that today. You don't see feature-length things on television in a 2-hour time block unless it's a special event, really. What convinced him to give you kind of a double spot?
Well, it was of the time. I mean, this is so long ago that cable was just starting, and they didn't really expect too much out of cable. I mean, now we know that, the best content comes on cable, but back then it was very uncertain. It was kind of like eating at the little kids' table at Thanksgiving. It wasn't like all the big shows were on network and all the little shows were on cable. So they had plenty of time to fill, and it was probably a big misunderstanding why they booked us, because originally the Comedy Central was supposed to be like MTV and basically have VJs who set up comedy clips for upcoming comedy movies and classic comedy movies. And I think they were looking at us because in their own way they saw us like as doing something similar to that. They thought, oh, these guys talk during movies, but they could just as easily set up clips.
Yeah.
And so I think our show was so inexpensive. I think it was about $35,000 an episode when we started for a two-hour episode.
That's incredible.
It was unbelievably inexpensive. So, and this kid just kind of hung out in the cheapest part of TV for a really long time, but that's where all the kids found it. The kids staying up at midnight at their dad's house and looking for something on TV, they would find it. So it got kind of lucky. I wanted to mention, too, my figures that were based on the Marshall figures. I'm jumping back to ventriloquism.
Please.
They were built by Conrad Hart. So
wow.
Conrad Hart made me 2 twin figures, and I'm trying to think. I based it on that original figure in the Marshall catalog. Was his name Squeaky, or he had a funny name, but it's basically what Cherry Mahoney became.
Yeah. Yeah, that's.
I can't remember the figure's name, but anyway, that to me is like the ultimate dummy, is that Cherry Mahoney or a Marshall figure. And what's also interesting about Frank Marshall is he physically looks like those dummies, and they say that's true with sculptors, that they can't help but make the thing they're sculpting look like them because you're so familiar with your face. But the photos I've seen of Frank Marshall, he has kind of a charactery face like that.
Yeah, and it's wonderful. In fact, Jimmy Nelson, there's an interview with Jimmy Nelson where when Jimmy had Danny made, he had to leave a picture of himself. I think, I might be misremembering, but long story short, Danny, if you look really, really close, looks like Jimmy. So, that's always, was always a part of how Frank worked.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was wonderful. So, yeah, it's fantastic. You were, again, I just think creative genius. I'm excited to see what you do. Now, what you're coming up with next, I hope that your one-man show comes close so that I can come see it. I know you're on the East Coast, so come to New York with it.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. You know what? I was just in Brooklyn at, I'm trying to think of the place, the Bell Auditorium. I was just there 2 weeks ago doing my search for the ultimate ventriloquist dummy. So I was just within a stone's throw of you.
Oh, darn, I missed it. But yeah, it really, I'm excited. I got to ask because I don't think this is any classified anything, because I'm referencing something that's been you've been mentioning for the last couple years now. Any news at all on the MST projects that were mentioned since 2014? Anything you can tease?
I can't, other than it's going to happen.
Wonderful. I hope it's sooner than later, because you have a lot of diehard fans out there that are like, "When's it coming back?" He's been talking about it for 2 years.
Thanks so much, man.
So it's
thanks so much, and it's really great to get to talk to talk to you and the ventriloquists out there that listen to what you do.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and I'm excited. I think you reference Vent in terms of being an inspiration and a jumping off point and something you started in, but to really dig in here today made for a very special interview. I was going to ask if you had any for the final question. I was going to ask if you had any advice for aspiring writers. You can answer that, but since we really dug into the Vent thing, anything in the Vent world you want to see from Vents coming up in today's world?
Oh man, no, I think it's super interesting what they're doing, and there's just so many creative people out there. I just think it's great, and I'm always amazed. I think Steve Axtell's super creative. I just get knocked out Steve. When I see the stuff he's doing, and I don't know. It's really cool. It's just it's so, I have to say, it's so much more dimensional than it was when I was a kid, So it's always fun for me to check in and see what people are up to.
Awesome. Well, you are welcome to check in here anytime. Joel Hodgson, thank you so much for being with us.
All right. Thanks, man. Yeah, we'll see ya.
Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Joel, you were awesome. Thank you for taking the time to do this, and I wish you all the best. I know you're crazy busy. Whatever projects you have in the works, I will be watching, as will the rest of your diehard fan base. And that's it for us today. Tomorrow is the big, big day, number 100. In the meantime, you can find all you need to know about Talk for Two by going to our website, talk4spellout2.com. That's talk4two.com. Reach out by emailing talkfor2cast@gmail.com and find our group or like us on Facebook by searching for Talk for Two. Tweet us and about us using @ and hashtag Talk for Two. Signing off for Talk for Two, I'm Matt Bailey, reminding everyone out there to keep talking for two.
You can hear more show business interviews with the stars at talkfor2.com, where you'll also find one-of-a-kind products to improve your own show. That's talk4two.com.